그래서 이제 여기에 당은제 알아서 아니 지게 다바템 보세요 말해서 그런데 미다바레서 그러다 미다바레서 님이 지금이야 직마 교와 친제 님이 매바 차로레스 다 매바 차로디 갑라 아는 저기 가 고션 지금 수수 규절하다 변조하다 아니 지게 원쇼다 뉴바다 드롭바다 그러니까 여배네 차상 직샤샤 존마도 캐줘야 가요 말해서 다네 캐줘야지 요르데 가리오레스네 네 개와 제반에 개와디 캐줘야 요르 디바 제반 디바디 캐줘야 디 기회레단 디비레디 캐는 거래 저래 다 소수기 가와드는 소수 디만 하신제 누구래서 난 디비레디 캐줘 디비레디 가져왔으네 아니 규디기 아니 지 개와치말만 가솔 마게 디기에는 지게 동안 용어야 다 되니게 온도스전에 강한 용어야 되기 때문에 용거래제 다 개외레디가 가는 것은 는 개외레디게 된돌 파게 아니 지게 하다미 고바 톱텐 텐델량 안제 디기 주야 안데 텐델량 개와제 안데네 바제 람귤레게 아니야 konde peje yan ji tarbada tamje kibo ko toptu go res da dene za da nga zulya ane digi go ore dungal go yo mares mogo za dungal yo yu dipa de sa gyo mares ane digi yo yu an de o gwa de nga zo ga gang tu du jene sa go res ji adu sene nga di yoge an di ko ma shi go wa
Good morning. Good afternoon. This morning, we again made reference to the fact that this life is not permanent. It will come to an end. All of us, it is certain that we will die. And when our death comes, no matter how sincere the wishes of our loved ones around us, they cannot prevent our death. No matter our reputation, and our power and influence, that's lost at death. And so too, all our possessions, they are all left behind. All that follows us from this life to the next are karmic imprints, virtuous and non-virtuous karmic imprints, and they follow us like a shadow. And in dependence on the strength of our karma, if it's the strongest imprint that ripens at the time of our death, if it is a virtuous imprint, we will once again take rebirth in the higher realms. But if it's a non-virtuous imprint, we'll fall into the lower realms, where the lifespans, or the duration of our time in the lower realms is long and the suffering intense. And moreover, the karma that accompanies us into our next life will also determine whether our varying conditions are favorable or not. And in particular, if we attain a human rebirth, if we have the other required conditions to ensure that we can continue our spiritual progression, that too depends on the imprints that we accumulate in this life. Recognizing this adds to the sense of urgency that we need to focus on developing virtuous imprints, training our mind, developing ever deeper habituation to virtuous ways of thinking.
아디네 자당 안주 개와사야디 개와사세디 안주기 셈나라야 삼로 개위 삼로 적다 개위 삼로선 안줄야 셴리야 지가 아까소레 세와 직매 셈베 삼로당 잠제 주야기 데네게 삼로 차상 개와 인식으로다 사실 개와다 미개와세야디 안주기 니 제보 디기 주야 될 개와사 데네 자다 개와도 간에 두고래서는 나뭐 안내가 capsule conjunction capsule typique camroche ore sade camroche ane ndi jige dine nga jugi je alunga isuni nyeche domyare den nga jugi do sene kowi기 chele 닝보민도 sembi기 kowi chele gyenda 다 델레 탈두게 삼고 탈우도 셈비게 탈두게 그 탈바토비게 되니기 듬바디게 다 디스페메시 제침볼 탈바도니기 되니 듬바게 다데 탈바도니 듬바게 되다 콜레 탈비 탈바토고도 셈베 삼다제 삼다다 저기 Di Dondalada, Monte Jimba, the Surface, the net Tomba Dame, but to be share of command Yamnaji, Chigungurva. Then a young Tele Logia chair, which it was Nindo chair given, Korea Tabale, Targudu, Taba Togudu, some time do. Tangarajibu Mares, Semjan Nale, Nasa Jigre, Semjan Saja, Taya Bachire, Chazane, Taba Togure, Digi Dukure, Tisa, Semjan Hamje. And Diki to go to Chesa, Dunga the Trahodo, Semjan Dewa, the Temper shows a big Jambacom. That's Semjan Dunga Tana shows a big Nijicom. Nijicom said that Semjan Dunga and Tana shows and some of the doos Jeniana and Tider, what the Nijicom said. That they are Jumse Samda, Jumsensa, Dunga Drago, Jumsenka, Dunga the Trature, two Mare, and that doos in the Samdana, Dunga the Trana Nijicom. The negate Dunga Trao. Travel some Nijo Commodo, and I asked him to how about the kitchen. Or the Dunga that Java de Niji is. Just as some gentlemen do Dunga Java the Niji, Consolia, and it was a name Consolia, Sosuga, Yammer, the consular love consular Jangju. Then a consul Comjuche, Nakon Dunga Churchia, San Yuko, Gogin, Sempike, some lodge, Semju Park, Geodo. Then Tangi Shebalo Consulia come down about somebody consular Lagu, the Lagovala and Shingu, Maranga machine be no more, but they get Seko to Jeza, that Dele, General Pember to your top show to Yasho, did that San Yokoma Resha, Jeza, San Yokoma Toba Show, Sempike, that Janju Sim, Dushin, the sum of the Yane and Gom, they come here, they watch and you sem Gomba, they come here, and Yimichik, Nazula, they nigga some of the. And some gentlemen don't know San Yokoba Toba show, somebody Joma my by Yafana, then it changes by Chaguro. Then and then Yaya Droya Mado, my girl Droya Mara, and then it's then the Jimba to the Zuben mentioned, Dusine, and San Yokoba to two words. Japso Drojet, that Dewa Toyega, Dunga said that the Giduaki, you some not on the Dustango, yes, I should do. And I did it, that's all this Sungurada. You. Guna Devosa, Digi Jubiada, Tava Tamji Kimbe to you, Gudi, Dusinal, Lodi Dusin, Jando Shores, Gomores.
Furthermore, it was mentioned this morning, as well as yesterday, that the meaning of virtue is cultivating virtuous or wholesome ways of thinking. So generating minds such as love or compassion, wisdom, ethical restraint, and so forth. These are the minds of virtue. This is the accumulation of virtue. And these we need to try and deepen our habituation to, make them a substantial part of who we are, of our personality, minds that dominate and guide us. So to bring this about, we engage in meditation, which is the process of developing wholesome, virtuous, habitual tendencies. So the meditation, we start with refuge, turning, as described this morning, to the three jewels, with understanding that it is by relying on the guidance relying on their guidance and cultivating the minds of the Dharma within us, that we will gain protection from suffering, freedom from suffering. Following a reflection on refuge, one meditates on a variety of topics. And there are two pathways one can take here. But one will always start with refuge, thereafter ethics, the determination to restrain one's mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions and thereby restrain one's speech and behavior. This is the ethical restraint of body, speech, and mind, the determination not to harm others. Thereafter, one reflects on the faults of samsara, coming to recognize that as long as one remains in bound in the suffering realms of samsara, one will experience suffering. And this is an important reflection to look at deeply, so that one can give rise to a genuine determination to emerge from these suffering realms of samsara into a state that's liberated from suffering, liberated from samsara. So this is the mind of definite emergence or renunciation, where one has generated the determination to emerge from the suffering realms of samsara and attain a state of lasting, stable happiness. Having generated that, this mind of definite emergence, then one meditates on the 6 practices that one needs to cultivate in order to achieve definite emergence. And once again, one will meditate on ethics, as well as generosity, patience, joyous perseverance, concentration, and the wisdom realizing emptiness. So this is one path that one can cultivate, which leads to the attainment of liberation from samsara. The other path starts the same and continues to the point where one generates definite emergence. Because up to this point, one has been focusing on one's own experience, one's own lived experience and one's own mind, looking at how one suffers how oneself suffers in samsara and the causes for this, and one's looking at one's own lived experience and generating the determination, I have to gain freedom from suffering. I can do this. It's completely within my capacity to attain freedom from suffering. I have to do this. So that's the generation of definite emergence. Just like was presented before, the divergence comes here, where now one lifts one's focus from one's own lived experience and thinks about that of others, and recognizing that there is no difference between myself and them. I want to be freed of suffering and abide in lasting happiness. So too does every being. The reasons why I'm trapped in suffering and I keep having unwanted circumstances befall me, that is the same as everyone. They too encounter suffering experience upon suffering experience for the same reasons as I do. We are no different. So how can I only wish for my own welfare, my own freedom from suffering, when others yearn for it too? I have to help them. So here, one's lifting one's focus and coming to recognize the situation of others, recognizing how they are suffering and giving rise to the wish, may they, like me, be freed of suffering. This is the mind of compassion. The mind of compassion has as its object all sentient beings. The wish is, may all sentient beings, without exception, be freed of every form of suffering without exception. So every sentient being includes oneself. So one has the wish, may all beings be freed of suffering. That is the mind of compassion. Then the mind of love is the wish, may every sentient being, again including oneself, abide in lasting happiness. The happiness that is never punctuated by even a moment of pain or misery. One meditates on love and compassion again, and for it to actually be transformative, one cannot meditate in a way that I've just mentioned, which is just an expression of an aspiration. One needs to use a lot of reasons, because we use reasons to deepen our realizations of love and compassion, so that they become genuine and sincere and abide in all circumstances. And as love and compassion becomes deep and sincere within one, this burning wish for beings to be freed of suffering, we become dissatisfied with merely that, because we recognize it is only an aspiration. And we here now develop this strength of mind, the courageous mind that determines it is my responsibility to help others. This mere aspiration is insufficient. I need to help others. I recognize the benefits these teachings and mental transformation are bringing to me. Others require guidance in this way too. And here one generates an altruistic attitude of universal responsibility, or often translated as special intention, where one takes responsibility for all beings, takes responsibility for the welfare of all beings. But with this responsibility that one is willingly taking on comes the recognition, but I yet have to help myself. I am still a limited being, and I don't really know how to help others skillfully. I have to develop spiritually myself so that I can help others. And the being who is perfected, who is not limited in any way, who can help others in any way and always perfectly in accordance with their own karmic backgrounds and individual disposition, that being is a Buddha. And at this point, one determines, I have to become a Buddha. I have to become a Buddha in order to help others, in order to skillfully guide others to attain their own liberation, their own enlightenment. And when one meditates in this way again and again, so that one keeps generating bodhicitta, this, or in English, the mind of enlightenment, this determination to become a Buddha in order to help others, to guide others to attain their own liberation from suffering, one cultivates this repeatedly over a sustained period to the point where it becomes uncontrived. It's such a deep part of one's very being that it naturally and spontaneously arises within you. And at this point, one becomes a bodhisattva. And as a bodhisattva, one's mind is pervaded by wholesome qualities such as love and compassion, and therefore everything one does is focused on the welfare of others, focused on benefiting others, and therefore everything one does is virtuous. So this entire range of trainings that I present, or sequence of trainings, whether one branches towards one's own liberation or for Buddhahood for the sake of others, and every preceding meditation within that, you would have recognized from the presentation, each preceding step, each step comes about independence on the preceding step, which itself comes about independence on the step previous to that. There is a sequence of dependency, or another way to express it, this is the sequence of cause and effect. That one result, one realization comes about is a result that came about in dependence on its own cause. And that cause, in fact, itself was a result that came about in dependence on its own cause. So in this way, we see how we train our mind. There's a specific sequence, and the prior cultivation helps the latter realization.
jamni je chanju sem gomure sadi dinande signane ngosu yomarwa da yomarwa ina dondade besinade signala jamni je chanju sem paju gom sadi sik ngosu yomarwa san sik dordirowa chisa dordiyo cha chasa dene dina sik mangu charuwa sik dordirowa chisa delya delite ka deji nga juni mo shoba shile dedere semne capsu droa be la gidwa diri shoge shege tamadile jisa capsu droa be sedu tadi dinal dungor donda dinala dedere semne capsu diri shoge she sik tamadi diri shoge tamadi one dedere semne capsu droa be la yode jisa capsu droa le bezu chegore sedu tadile lam yongsu zogba dina di pa guwa len tuwa yungo re. Kasi gyabsu zhuwa besi gyabsu zhuwa yu, gyabsu zhuwa gansa, gyabsu jita zhuwa tsu, gyabsu zhuwa jebu sachi le yungo rwa. Seta gyabsu zhuwa yu le de sanji gongcho, chio gongcho, gedi gongcho, gyabsu zhuwa yu di re. Gyabsu zhuwa su di chio gongcho sena gyabsu zhuwa. Dene ge ene da di labja ka lab kore labdu chisada diba ponga kewa zhuwa. Dene tarpada tamche kimbo kobar lam nyamne dene chekore seshimbadi dinare gyabsu zhuwa ki dinare gyabsu zhuwa di nyamne chi chekin sene zhuwa. Da nyamne cheta rimba dene chekore sen dinare dungore, da dinare gungore. Chisada dene eza gyabsu zhuwa be se sik chuno chi yomarde dele ya di nane pa gowa la lenyo du dati tenganzuki kibu chunwe lamyi rinpa chasa nyamsu limbi rinpa de gowa len tuwa yore kibu dringi lam nyamli rinpa chasa dina de gowa len tuwa yungure kibu chimbo sanje gowa dobe tepa chimbo lamyi nyamli rinpa de dina de gowa len tuwa gore chisna dendeki sik tuno jima de yore tenganzuki dus chine dende chik lobchunga chik mangura jang saba yore dende chik sik chik tangla doyende lamsang gyabsu tuwe yu gyabsu zhubi ki gansa, ane gyabsu jita zhubi tsu, ane gyabsu zhubi labja kar la gore, se samdaayido, din chasang dina le yunga sa gore.
In our very first session, when we looked at the third verse, Lama Tsongkhapa mentioned that this is a brief presentation, and we can see that it's just 15 verses. Because it's such a brief presentation, what I've mentioned now isn't explicitly mentioned here. You don't find the word definite emergence or bodhicitta. But those who have studied well, that meaning will arise for them. So where we concluded this morning was at the end of the 7th verse. Having contemplated in this way, go for refuge earnestly. So when one goes, those who've studied well, when they see the expression "go for refuge," they'll have a deep understanding of what that means, and their understanding will have deepened the way they experience refuge will have deepened independence on the amount of Dharma that has arisen within their mind, in that they'll know clearly what the objects of refuge are, the 3 jewels, the Buddha jewel, the Dharma jewel, and the Sangha jewel. But the meaning of the Dharma jewel, these true paths and true cessations within their own continuum, this will be vividly clear because of their own spiritual development thus far. And moreover, they will understand that through going for refuge, that this entails the acceptance that one must refrain from harm. It is not acceptable to harm others. One needs to refrain from harm. And they'll have a deeper understanding of that too, which is the mind of definite emergence, is the determination not to harm oneself, but rather to gain freedom from the states of harm. And moreover, bodhicitta, they'll understand, is the mind that is determined to benefit others in the very best of ways. So therefore, definite emergence and bodhicitta, those 2 terms that, whilst not at all explicitly stated, that will arise in the mind of those who have studied and meditated well. So therefore, actually, the trainings of the 3 types of practitioners, all of them will arise to the mind of the person just from reading the word the term go for refuge earnestly. They will understand what that means for them based on their prior study and meditation.
Tubi kimbi ten la nga ba yis. Ten tim nga la lobdang chambar lop. Kasa ten tim nga la lodang chambar lop. And du tsam nimar ne sojon ya la ye lebra la ne songwa shin tu jes.
Turning to the 8th verse, the Buddha recommended the non-ordained to train their mind in accord with the 5 lay vows and the 8 one-day vows of accumulation and purification. Having received these vows properly, it is essential to guard them, particularly keeping them for the benefit of this and the next life.
당한저 캡수 조그레세 데 저게 당한저게 캡수 줘야 돼 가르치는 캡수 간에 줘서는 동화시 삼다 코와나 가송에 동화래 델레 타고도 델레 껴베 뉴버데 술로 열었은 캡년 건조스로 열에 내선에 디니데 하고 한다 캡주 건조스 캡년 건조스 껴그래 선비 이체대단 캡조스로 다다 껴그래서 캡조게 이체 세베질라 캡조게 랍제디 랍고고라 랍제디 가르스나 데디 디시고레 제제 가서 대동호수 시에 랍제디 가르스나 디시고레 소주바 방와 마진발렘바 방와 안저 로엠 방와 준시바 방와 창창 동아 방야디 나 방야기 방야디 냠는 제리다 랍제디 디냠슬레디 디송고레 제자다 되니기 김비에 땐라 가서 투비 김비에 땐라 나바 이신 투바 상여 줌는 되기 나 랍중라 제바 망부제여로 받아 망부여로 받아 되체 되는 지겨 지체 조 말해서 김비에 땐라야 안에 약쇼디 나바서 김비에 땐라 디네시나 나 디냠는지나 디그레서 디송노 내가도 송고레서 생도 김비에 땐라 나바 이 아니 덴팀가 세데 가르센 덴팀가 세 덴비 팀가 되가서는 소주바 방와 마진발렘바 방와 로엠 방와 준 방와 네 미준데 미슐라 미준 세드로 미슐라 미준 방와 아니 가소레 소주 마진 미상 주바 준 아니 제 가소레 창동아 차동아 바디 방방아디 디방고고레 해서지
The verse starts with the Buddha recommended the non-ordained to train their mind in accord with the 5 lay vows. So we see from the text as follows immediately from going for refuge. So when one goes for refuge, one go to refuge to the three jewels, there are various trainings or commitments associated with going for refuge, which one expression will be to not cause any harm. And part then of ensuring that one does not cause harm is to live in accord with the 5 lay vows. So the ordained have their own set of vows, and the non-ordained have these 5, which are to abandon killing, to abandon stealing, to abandon sexual misconduct, to abandon lying, and to abandon intoxicants.
어디가 봐야 되지? 근데 안 마침라 로단 참벌 롭세 소수기 다 로단 참벌 소수기 다 루이 누바 강조 대다 튠바진의 호주 장도를 지고라고 그래야지.
And furthermore, we see in the second line, train your mind in accord with the 5 lay vows. It's not a mere case of not doing it, but training one's mind so that one actually abandons the wish to do so.
나데니기 나는 저기 당보 코로나 데니기 팀가디 수림 순고를 해야 돼. 수림세에 대한 아주 윤된 담지의 중요하게 사실 마소나 디레스 월 수림소야 돼. 그래서 수림소야 돼. 명아주 람 냠는 제기 예조나 장주심 게게 당보 수림송고를 해서 제가 수림송제 나는 예조 자심 게하다. 되는 띵에 신의 주변에 수림비 파당보 수림하고 송 되는 수림이 시제 된 사실 마소 된 시제제 되는 아주 이게 띵해진 주야다 차산 냠는 티켓인데 조고래 제가 수림송에 대 예심보래 해서 송고래 제가 수림세에 아주게 된도를 마서 계세게 사시나시레스 제가 된도 계세게 사시데까지 야고 연아야 내가 된도 야가기 그래서 된도 야가기나 니 제부 야가용 니 제부 야가용은 한 밀이야 만주 사야동야다 망하다 배주 체용 거래서 사시데 여바질 약보라 맨날 돈도 뒤에 게도 오스마도 기 말했어. 나 사실 균이 도라버도 되는 균인데 돈도 균이 기 말아 봐서. 진짜 디네 상아주 수림 소야데 예주든 비 수림 송거리 야부 부이다 오송여나 델레디네 게쇼디게 야갈이 그래서 수림 때 징딩이지나 델레비 게쇼디 징딩 말 수림 균이 야고 송면데 게쇼디 야불에 두 말했어. 진짜 디네 상도 수림 아주 송야데 빼 마세 게시모래 해서 다 송거래 세데 디송거래.
These vows are the boundary within which we should live our lives. They're the boundary within which we will be living ethically. And ethics is indispensable for our spiritual development. It is the very basis for our spiritual growth, the foundation in which all our good qualities will grow. For example, or the analogy that's often given is if one wants to have a wonderful harvest, one will prepare the soil well. And if the soil's been well prepared and it's fertile, and one plants the appropriate seeds for that soil and treats it well, an abundant crop will grow. But if the soil is poor, or it's not tended at all, then the crop will be disappointing. So for ourselves to have aspiration to various spiritual goals, to achieve any of them, we need to develop this foundation of ethical restraint. It is the basis for concentration, and it's in fact the basis for all spiritual qualities. So therefore, it's indispensable that one has the foundation of ethics.
수림 송라비 맞아 삼로 나라야 이 지금에 sembe 삼로 따야 돼. 지산 참발 롭세데 롭고서 뒤 참발로서 참세디 한 뒤쇠데 뒤쇠 참바 지게 안에서 소수기 뉴바 참바 데네스 안데 롭세데다 삼로디 베능에 소주 sembe 소주 지금에 sembe 삼로디 주래. 지산 데네스 소주 지금에 삼로 마다 마시한테 소마제 받sam기 수림 송라고 말아. 베능아지 이후되되 지금 ben에 가소래 되네기 수름 숨긴 삼라가 마다베네 니구디간다 되네기 게디나 소식이 제대로 말와 semjen에도 코로나서 칼라서 저다 야데 니디베네 키우지 기디 갑라 콘도 소주지요 말이네 콘도 수름 송라고 말와 제가 수름 송라 병아도 삼로나래 가르 순고라서 순간디 수 순고라 삼로디서 되는가 저기 디스와 본부 파수로도 구송와디게 순고라 가르 순고라서는 냥아디 깔고라 까바데 순소래 수 순고라서 구송와요 순고래라와 당아 저기라 류가게 줘봐 샹려 샹 심정 소셔봐다 샹이 잘라 구마구야다 나요 거네 샹려 준시야다 고고 땅에게디 마요 디용야디 순고래선 까고래서 그러다 수 순고래서네 샘디게 삼로당 순고 다 삼로 간에 순고래라나 미 그디네 소주지기 매 선배 삼로다 니 구마구 매 선배 삼로다 내는 잘 준식이 매 선배 두신의 삼로디 안에 양 땅고르지 디 순간이 디 삼로디 그래야지 제선당은 저기 삼로 규었다요 텐데 계주도 보자 내게 삼로디 두 스타이드다 내게 삼로 따되면은 삼로 따되 수름 순고래야지 수름 송아래 송래야지 제가 내게 삼다 송여도 디코노 삼고는 개와래다 디케와 가지 슈크체나 semje 속지기 매 sembe 삼로디 가지 슈크체면나 개와치마 밀리터에게 규체고래 제가 되네자 하다 미고마도 규체고 제가 로단 참배 송시도 되네게 삼다야디 장고그래스 로단 참바시도 소수기 뒤쇠 아니지 가제 야두다데 직되네게 주설을 뛴바다 안데를 로다 참바서 소수기를 뉴바 니가제 투도로 써야다 되네게 로다 참바시도 되네 난 가시게다 제 어당에 sem정 소수 지금에 sembe 써야다 되네게 아니지 차상 지금에 sembe 신가가 써야 안딜에 하바 아니 아직 삼다 써야 돼 망부용으로 되는지 로다 소수기 뉴베 가지고 로다 두 삼나 야네 야도 땅고 그래서 그러다 송시 랍세데
This is an important expression, a choice of words here in the second line. Train their mind in accord. So this in accord also carries the meaning of what we have at the end of the fourth line. It is essential to guard them. So the meaning of ethics in our Buddhist context, it isn't merely a not doing, so not killing, for example, but it's rather to train your mind, which we have in the second line, to train your mind so that it is in accordance with the vows, so in accordance with, for example, not killing. So the mere act of, or the mere lack of killing is not what we're aspiring for. What we are aspiring for is to train our mind so that it is in accordance with or in harmony with not non-violence, non-killing. Because, again, just staying with this one illustration, if one does not have the opportunity to kill and one's not killing, well, that's fine. But when that opportunity comes, and in fact, perhaps there's no one who will know, or it's really, you feel it's in your advantage, to your advantage to do so, if one hasn't trained one's mind well, one will readily find an excuse to do so. So the idea of ethics is that we train our mind to become ethical. The way that we usually will express an unethical behavior will be either physically or verbally. And these follow from our mind. So the term ethics can also be ethical restraint, in that we restrain our mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions. And thereby, our behavior, our physical and verbal behavior, will be restrained too and will remain ethical. But it's done so in a way that the mind itself is ethical, that the thought to kill, for example, will not come. Or if it comes, there'll be almost a repulsion from that killing, from that thought to kill. Because it's very clear through one's training that such behavior is inappropriate and always so. And this is how one's mind is in accord with the vows, where the thought to act in a way contrary to the vows is seen as repulsive. So the role of ethics, and why we see a word in the fourth line, to guard or to protect them, ethics fulfills a similar role to a bodyguard who protects the life, the body of their principal. That is the role of the bodyguard, and that is the role of an ethical mind. The ethical mind protects us from accumulating the causes for suffering. It guards our mind from going in the direction of non-virtue, and restrains it from staying in a non-virtuous direction if it does go there. So this is the meaning of guarding vows, or keeping vows, or protecting vows. It's guarding the mind from coming under the influence of the afflictions, the minds that do harm. So for this to come about requires training, as we see here in the second line. We need to train our mind. It's not sufficient to merely accept that one should not act in a certain way, but one's mind should be trained so that it is not in accordance with such behavior, but in accordance with harmonious ways or virtuous ways of acting. And this kind of training needs to be done repeatedly over a sustained period, so it becomes natural, second nature to one.
가라가치기 마신이 하모거데 하모는 가지고 냠는 지식 말아 디네 자당 주기 지당 아주 되수수본 나이도 안 나기도 세다 안직 대우용구민도 세 교회로 충조라 통과를 된 주기 교회원에 단에데 교인바데 삼노데 하고 두고 말 하고 마토가지 하고는 셈려 검심해 봐지 검심 맞춰도 어느디 거소리 아주 괜찮다 타야게 삼노 숙침부터 내두고 말. 배나 저기 칼라로 지금 내기 열어서 하고 그걸 칼라서 한 먹어라 디사네. 사고로 디 내기 열어서 다 충주 사진 오세자 지금 말해서 디 님이 직사나가 디그레선 배sam다. 그 내기 여바 하고 그때 이나다 내고라서 셈 딩기 삼다지 곰시 셴발로 같이 매봐라. 다티 셈 딩게 셴발로 다티 균에 자기면서 균에 자기 말봐. 디나시 가지고 강아로 충주라시 하고 그거데나 셈 딩기 강아디 뭐 마신 봐 둥아디 뭐 마신 봐서 델이야 타르게 삼르기 투 마투바디 디네레 디네상 저기 제가 다디디 네 대시 쇼게네 디바시아디 디네레다 디제부 마서 숨라 기고래 되네 아니 동아 숙침 연구 거래사지 제가 되네게 라트je 디 하고야 된다. 근데 개화세대 되네 디지는 된절기에 될래나 타바 담제기 보고 토투게서 라트je 바로 제가 디베 저기 동아 임바디 빠지 동아 레 삼비게다 동아 레다 삼비게 저기 셈 딩기다 오네라 셈 딩기 곰시치 차고 그래 동아 레사데 근데 검시 차선 델레지 마탄다 탑미는 선비게 곧 타도가 삼로데 아신기 리고래 진짜 디네 인자 가상 먼저 두부 세시 상인 좀는디게 와라나스를 최고 송비기 최고 콜로 골비기 골와 제사 상인 좀는디게 가상 와라나스를 최고로 골바 당보코는 동원 셰버자세세 제사다 당보 안아주길래 동아디 파 하고 야고 삼다 동아레다 디 동아디 하고 신고를 제대 동아 셰버자 되네 가서 동아 이 규디 제바제 하고도 군주세들이 진짜 군주 방와자스 자다 당보코는 동아 하고 셰셔스 동아 하고는 동아 규디 간에 제제 디 매봐서 쇼스 다네 안티 간에서 매봐서 그래서는 람곰고래서 가서 게디 매봐서 두고서는 뒷방에서는 고바래 곡된세 디네 디기 차버스 고방원도 지에서 디 간에서 토고래서는 매 람간에서 가서 동아데 간에서 매봐서 그러고 고바데 간에서 토고래서 람곰고래서 람곰바자스 람곰고래서 다 람곰만 간에서 곰고래서도 다디 디소래 접수 줘야다 주름 써야다 되네 가서래 잠니지 고미하다 장주심 되네 신의 주비야 다음에 봐도 베시라고 디소래 람곰바샤 디곰 디소곰발에 되네 매봐서 그래서 진짜 되네 예자 상여주는 담보코는 동아시아바자사다 되네 군조 디동아시아바도 심주제 제바제 동아이바 라트바제 쇼스 대하고는 디규가리면 유디세주당 유디하고는 유디 매봐서 셔셔스 된 동아 매봐서 그래서 진짜 유디 매봐서 셔셔스 Duni mevasosna tarba tobu gore, digires, guktense tobu digires. Antiganis mevasurosa, lamgom gore, que samnot angom, some gom gene, meva charu resort. Dirwadana diro. Sesadi, Mazu gom said, this year Kasan Lam Gombarja said, Gom had this during Mazutin Mashi that you had to get into Sungorwa.
As has been said a few times this weekend together, that it's important we gather knowledge so that we can have a basis to understand ourselves and understand the reality of our situation. It's through gathering knowledge that we have something to reflect and then meditate on. So we need to really come to understand and recognize our situation well. So let's say sometimes you're feeling a little ill, not something a little bit unsettled, and you don't know why. There's not much you can do about it. Or if you find out why, perhaps it's something you eat and you have a bit of an allergy to it, you say, I eat this, then my stomach's not so happy afterwards. Then you have an understanding of the cause and you've recognized the result, that suffering. But you continue perhaps from time to time to eat something, even though you know you really shouldn't. And you say, I like the taste, I can deal with the result. And one continues like that. But even when one thinks, I really should refrain from eating that, it's not doing me any good. Now I feel I have far more discomfort than before. But still, it's difficult to entirely stop eating it. Every now and again, one still does. So this is an illustration in which we can see that one has some understanding of what's going on, but it's not really deep. If it were deep, one would readily be able to turn away. Perhaps if it was something that if one ate it, one would die, then one would have a strong aversion. That is the strength of aversion we need to cultivate within ourselves, but not towards foodstuffs, but towards the actual causes of suffering. If one understands our situation well, and that includes, therefore, the whole process, one will be able to radically transform ourselves and do so quite quickly. So we need to look deep within ourselves to understand our situation. This is essential. And to be able to look deep within, we have to gather extensive knowledge, and whilst gathering that knowledge, apply it to our minds. So yesterday was the anniversary of when Buddha first taught the Dharma, when he turned the wheel of Dharma for the first time in Varanasi, and he taught the Four Noble Truths. So the Four Noble Truths we know as the true sufferings, true origins, true cessations, and true paths. When Buddha taught them, he taught that true sufferings are to be known, they're to be understood, they're to be recognized within oneself. Here we really need to go very deeply. And there are different divisions to suffering, but we need to get down to the very subtle divisions of suffering. And then, whilst we are going through these varying layers of suffering, to truly understand what it's like, what it means to be bound in samsara, we will naturally be turned towards the second. We'll have curiosity in the second noble truth, the truth of origin, the origin of our suffering, the cause of our suffering. And the Buddha taught this is to be abandoned. So here we look at what it is that is keeping us bound in suffering. Why do unwanted circumstances continuously befall us? Why are we not free of suffering? These need to be recognized and abandoned. And those causes, in brief, come down to our afflictions. We need to understand the role that they play. In the same way that if one recognizes a particular foodstuff presents great danger to oneself, one will have an aversion or repulsion to it. This is where we need to come to in relation to our afflictions. So that as soon as they may arise, we apply antidotes, because we know they are what will cause us pain. But to get there, we have to recognize suffering in all its subtle detail and its origins. And moreover, we need to gain certainty that suffering can be brought to cessation. It can stop. This is the third noble truth, the noble truth of cessation, and this needs to be attained. And how is it the state of cessation, where one will never suffer again, the state where one is liberated from suffering? How is it attained? This is the fourth noble truth, and the truth of the path. This needs to be cultivated or meditated. And the path or paths refer to the virtuous mental paths to cultivate within. It's through the term path is used because you walk along a path to get to a destination. But these are mental paths that one cultivates, paths that lead to the state of liberation and enlightenment. These are the various virtuous minds that we need to cultivate. So each of these steps needs to be known and recognized with vivid clarity. And to the extent that we see the truth of these Four Noble Truths, we will be able to turn away from our causes of suffering through cultivating the paths that will lead to happiness. And to the extent that we are finding this easy to do, that is the extent that we have come to know suffering and its causes and the paths to be cultivated. So this is why we need this basis of knowledge that's integrated through reflection and meditation.
Tene zada nga zugi, tati so nga zugi ngui ni su nga zugi member ta chikpare doa. Nga zugi nga nagidu si nga nagidu si member zal roba ne member lamsa okyo nagidu disa shosa men jigmi doa. Dambo kya kanes nagidu kaji kiti na son ko kiti naya kozo son nimu kaji jo son kanes nagidu diwa mangu tang doa. Sedadin dambo nazide 모치고 뭐다 투고래 진짜 다 되는지 나기도 lab도 오 나지도 영에 규되는 질 용고래서네 되는 규대 하고 그래 나자대 하고 가도 나자 영에 규대 하고 그래 나자 영에 규대 하고데 델멘제 되고요 와데 men제 dum되고라 나자 하 먹는 나자 영에 규대 하고 되는 men제 다시 오면 men디 나도 men제 잡으면 누르줘야게 냥아시 뭐요 와다 진짜 되는 사람 men비기 가네스 나기도 게디는 나야 고서 나는 이마 가서도 당아서 갑을 셈도 야 거기 거기 멤버의 신규어서 간술이 끼시는 간수 팔라고 한 소리도 디캔서 슈도 섬자딩도 디레민도 장모신 미고도 나나 자오데 나시디 약보 뭐서도 디 나주 귀리 뭐시 뭐 쳐요 그래 나주 귀리 끼는 귀도 하고도 귀들은 끼 나중에서 끼인다 하고도 델레 멘티셔도 끼인디 메바서도 나중에 나지 다루고 와 지난 디 멤비기 지금 나지게 당보 나지도 약보 하고 와지 디 나지 하고도 나중에 끼인 귀도 하고 되는 델레 멘주제 다야게 아니 지금 도시의 용도와 베디나시 지구지가래도 하다 나주 당보 동화 삼로 교와 다다들 강아 동화 용도 동화지 삼다 디야고 동화 디용야 귀디 간의 신고래서 귤바이 동화 용도 귀디 삼다 귤 삼다도 지지차상 용야 유 레다 녀모 바세 데데슬데 용고래서 데데슬 어다데 녀모 바데 다 녀모 바데 간의 스방고래서도 삼로 데니스 다지 도시용 검자 방고래서 then dum de ora sit no I knew membigi tang we ne su membigi menju che ta ta tinga ju lu ge na za chi gang a de ge membigi menju che ta de da sem ge gang a du a sem ge na za di ko kom che sam na ta se ta de menju che ta di zhuo ta lu ji ba cha ge duo de.
So actually the role that we need to each individually play is as if we were skilled physicians ourselves, someone with a lot of medical knowledge. So someone with a lot of medical knowledge, when they are ill, immediately the thought will be, why? What is the cause? What is wrong? And because of their knowledge, their why will be followed by investigation, which will lead to an identification of the cause that is wrong. And again, because of their knowledge, they will know what course of medical treatment to follow. So by having received many teachings and gathered a lot of knowledge, one has that education. What is indispensable is to keep applying that education to one's own mind. Looking at illustrations of suffering, experiences of suffering, and its causes, seeing this sequence, how afflictions lead to the accumulation of karmic imprints, karmic traits, which ripen in various habitual tendencies and suffering experiences. And looking deeply at this process, in particular, to recognize the role that our afflictions play in our suffering. And to the extent that we see this, we will know that our afflictions, in all circumstances, pose great danger. And to the extent that this is recognized, we'll readily, easily be able to cultivate the virtuous minds that oppose the afflictions. So to the extent that we are struggling to do this, it means the prior stages of gathering of knowledge and application of that knowledge to oneself, this still needs to be developed further. But when that's done, or as it's being done, it becomes easier to see the role the afflictions play in harming us, and thereby to apply the antidotes.
Sanjo Kazanda didn't ma jikma juedi Kazan Anju Garsone jik imici higirita sada, and then she na and the jig Gudan Jalada, Jukarina Tisu Pando Pangumarita sada, and the jingum the Kedra Yomar Digi Shia Sunkup to Mari, Yum the Kedra Yomar said. That and the Carriores and a Tibadona, Tibajana Dignum the Tuor, Kawachina Dignum the Kiayores, says not Tibajaban, digging us on Kiri, did do one the Yungore, Kawachina did the Yungore said, Tanganzulia Ratirushin, Dusi did it up, did as a Hanzulia, Sebu the Duenchipa, Motor of Chico was Yungua. That yes, I was Yamin that sometimes the Carella do that it Kimi della. Napa ye tentim gala loda samba lobsen just di changores de ngala capsu to jamdo chores dene surim kimbaina and kimbaina and jige rabjun je matubaji kimba jebena and the tentim gala logores surimti sungores the rabjun jebana digala manga to slap gores as you ever on dus jamores just nada jangore gomgore said diga so that was shared the gangi dige mang to yumze roje di 제고르다 디 마진에 되네요. 제고비 김세 안에 지금 마제바 있는 교행가를 연구해 봐. 안에 제네 판도 해 봐. 안에 도시네 이제 도송도 와도 망아체로지.
Yesterday and today we spoke about the certainty with which we will all die, and that when our death comes, no matter how fervent the prayers of our loved ones, they cannot stop our death, nor our reputation and possessions, nor can we take our reputation and possessions with us to our next life. But what will follow us are our karmic imprints. And it's our karmic imprints which will determine, not us ourselves, we don't choose. Our karmic imprints determine where we'll be born, whether in the higher realms or the lower realms, and what kind of conditions we'll have in our new body, in our new life. So we need to come to know this. This needs to be recognized, not a mere acceptance, but so that it has an impact on how we live our life. Because then, as we see here, training our mind in accord with the vows will be very easy, whether the vows are the ordained or the non-ordained. It will be very easy, because understanding the role that the afflictions play in our mind, we'll easily want to guard our mind from being unethical. We'll easily restrain our mind from being unethical, because we know that by protecting our vows, we will be preventing ourselves from suffering, and we will be stopping to cause harm to others. So therefore, by gathering knowledge and applying it, integrating it, living in accordance with vows becomes very easy to do.
Desmar Namsang Kora Church Chegdo. Digares and Kokomshiro, she would tell there, Kora said. Bendigo 저기 체딜이나 콘을 중중이야 지기 콘을 되어서 되는 양세 콘을 세고로 봐. 아니 겨왕 아마 되어야 양세 콘을 되는 게 겨왕 망부를 양세 콘을 사와서 콘을 만드는 리젤 마선에 슈 장진의 포그 야부슈 차딩어서 차딩어. 그래서 때스 말은 남상 콘을 쇼실리 고면이면 뉴벌 마선에 되네 뉴벌 셈 나라야 뉴벌이 여대서 남상 나셔 뉴벌이 슈치 모여서 당한서 소외 셈바데 지안에야는 삼마당 와서 뉴벌을 피고 뉴벌을 마저 충충 줘야 되와. 다른 한도 신니까 콘을 파 삼마다지 소외 셈바디 지기메 셈바디 소외 셈바디 봐 예소소 지기메 샬레 차와 지기메 꾸마꾸메 되네기 삼대야네 야도 나도 데디든 충충데 야 셰셰 로도 아니 데 아주 디삼마다 와서 고뼈 주고로 받아 고뼈 작발을 마서 쉬루고로 제산도 지내는데 소외 셈바야 뉴베 체제들이 독초기디 뇌세기 제기 뭐 가차 봐 충충충 루신 줘야 될 거다. 진짜 니난신은 저 샹리아 잠바다 제와 샹리아 잠바다 제와 공묘도 디니 공부에 삼로디 슈체셰 로디 안jan리아 뇌세지가 삼바디 고 라슈기 마 충충충 줘야 돼. 제상 아주 삼로디 두시네 장고래. 제가 야네 공부에서 공미야세디로 넘기가서 띵이지 고며 삼다데 넘기 삼다가서 삼로데 두산데 람사 제다지 람사 전초지 파직 주고로 봐. 제단 전바데 시신 된지 바직 유직랑 미제다랑 미제 현다 균에 마다지 파 공공모 가sam질이야. 되니게 삼지 땅에도 셴 가리네 잠데 미로지나 하 먹어세. 그 유제지도 내 두에 띵이 주에 리고라. 호가서 곰시체네. 네 곰체네. 네 용도 보라. 제가 곰네 용고를 되네 인자다 만주기 땡땡과 수림 써야 돼. 야네 양도 두시네. 곰고래 세대다 지 곰이야 돼. 곰세대 야네 양도 삼다야 돼. 두신 삼다야 돼. 예세 디게신 보래서 내가도 다른 안주기 셈도 주어 땅다디 두스당 고래 세 송고를 받아.
In this process of coming to know yourself well, you'll see clearly your habitual tendencies, how easily you respond in certain circumstances. And the easiest one to see is angry, whether you are easily enraged or not. So these come about through habituations that we have developed, that each time we're angry, it becomes easier to get angry again. And anger is an example, but it works like this with all minds, virtuous and non-virtuous. The more it arises, and that we allow it to arise, the more it will become habituated and will arise more easily, abide for longer, and have greater strength. And moreover, whilst this body is the body of this life, our continuum has travelled from lifetime to lifetime, gathering imprints, and these imprints have their potency, their energy. So we can be bringing into this life a deep habituation to a wide variety of ways of thinking. Hence, some people just naturally have of loving and compassionate natures. Others are easily enraged. So this is the case for all of us. We'll have some variety in terms of where our stronger habituations are, but in terms of this process, it's the same for all of us. And because this is how our mind works, that through becoming familiar with a particular way of thinking, that way of thinking grows in strength. This is the reason why meditation based on knowledge needs to be done repeatedly over a sustained period for change to come. So if one is trying to, for example, but it's like this with all the minds, if you're trying to destroy one's anger, overcome one's habituation to anger, this habituation has not been created solely in the years and decades of this life, but we've brought imprints into this life already. So therefore we need to try, by applying consistent efforts, to cultivate wholesome minds, to counteract these unwholesome ways of thinking. So by training in love and compassion, cultivating ever stronger love and compassion, then our habituation to anger starts to weaken because of the proportionate strengthening of our habituation to love and compassion. And then, as we're developing our love and compassion, when we find ourselves in confronting circumstances where before we used to get frustrated and annoyed without much effort, now our mind will stay calm and relaxed. And if it's to do with another person, our mind will stay warm and gentle towards them. And this is where we see the transformation of ourselves through this development of ever stronger habituations. And this is the process. I've just used the illustrations of anger and love and compassion, but it's through this entire range of minds, both wholesome and unwholesome. When one is meditating skillfully, developing ever stronger virtuous minds, these all serve to make us more ethical, in that we are keeping our mind on the side of virtue and restraining it from the afflictions. So as our mind becomes ever less afflicted, our mind becomes much calmer, much more settled, no longer drawn to things with excitement and abandon, or repelled with aversion. So this more calm, settled, subdued mind is a deeply ethical mind, and a mind that easily can be developed into a powerful mind of concentration. So in this way, through training and developing the variety of ethical minds, or virtuous minds, our ethics will be growing too, and therefore we can easily develop single-pointed concentration. So here I've presented the method for how we train our minds, because we largely just live through habituated responses. And this you'll see for yourself as you look inside your mind, how you react to certain stimuli in the same way again and again. And this is what we're trying to change and develop through the way described here.
kumaro shikine kuma kyawedi yaboshin go rese mashin bana dene ane chika kanga mango yong rese chezan dumro shi nyama chik lomba chele michi kuma shukya go rese michi kuma ja go rese ta limbo de kyabo shi go rese kyabo de nimichi le kuma sukye ta je kuma ja ya yodu chin chik chine kanas kegi na samje kyabo de 아 결혼이 kuma ja do win nimi chik se ne da gebo de ko kuma kanas ke na sin de nga chi kya do win sin ko kuma de la resa gebo de din kuma de gebo 결혼 마로 결혼 kuma ja 싱 마레스 세상 결혼 싱 마 결혼 마로 la resa gebo de nga gebo래 그 가고 싱가 마죠 kuma 시래 진 gebo가 딱 ngaje ro ba da 통신 그 kuma ja 싱 ne 마신 와 가요 de kuma ja 마신 가요 쓰는 가 루인 la resa 안 지기래 스님 줘버려지. 당연히 미사지 나라 주의시 고마자 즉도는 미사하고로 고마들 남산 하고로 그 넘이 장도로 여러 번 톡스 되살아서 개보 좀 마두치는 미사 주의시 개보는 예다야 다시 나래서 그래서 고마에게는 마신 거는 용시부라 잡시근데 딱 두시는 타루고 망고 잡투고 타루고 지상 가는 장도지 누가 지나 장도지 하고 얘나 근데 두아디 야고 제투야 네 야가데 야고 장도로 야고네 야가데 야고 제투야 마음이 되게 마마에 일이야 장도로 휴제오도와 마음이 장도로 매겨 말다네 소소 용라야와 저 장도 전도 내고 야고 제투고로와 디나지 내 진고 장도로 줘야 돼 남균 주시한 고가당아 줘로와 디기 미 양네 야세 고가당 두고로 거 빼니 주고 거 친구로 봐 넘빙아도 작선 마신 지어봐 오다 작선 시험은 작선 시신 말에 된 남직 작선 뜻이 시험은 넘빙 작선 마신 지어봐 직 주인지 시험은 남산 넘빙을 더 로하잖아 지금 남산 하고 도야 자고 넘빙을 로하잖아 직 소수기 마신도 지 소소래 남다 지어봐 지난 마신도 민 넘빙도 그 주인시 있어서 남산 하고 도 그래 넘빙 尊修国当这个别呀，我是听蒙古的那些呢，现在把地灵国的，但你们还是这两国当的，今天样式国没记了呀，样式国当土过了，可是个辛苦了，其实人就会现在干的上，现在的个讲多人呢，可能呢，如果现在讲多人呢，也不截图，如果的蒙古截图多啊。这顶那些的也好的讲多了，也不那也截图过来，讲多些了没那也不些了截图嘛嘞。如果现在讲多了，也不跟。即那些人个如果这个些人蒙古讲过了，那也不如果也不接触过来，你的那个讲到那如果这个其他的马新会呢，如果现在接触也要么来，然后如果去如果现在接触嘛也是这种的。
The method for training our mind that requires repeated effort over a sustained period. This is indispensable, otherwise transformation cannot come. It's not possible to develop new habits without overcoming past or strong contrary habits. And this is not just the case for training our mind. It's a case for all aspects of life. One needs skill based on knowledge to be good at something. So for example, if one wants to steal, if one wants to become a thief, one needs to know what you're doing, otherwise you'll have a very short-lived career. And there's some story about a king who had a thief brought to him, and he said to the king, "How do you do it? How do you manage to steal so successfully and so regularly and keep getting away with it?" And the thief said, "I'm not going to tell you." And the king said, "No, you're not. In fact, you're going to show me. You're going to show me how you do it. I want to learn the skill." And the thief said to him, "But you don't know what you're doing. You have no experience of stealing. You don't need to steal. Your whole life you've been a prince and now a king. What need do you have for stealing?" And the king said, "I am the king. You are just a thief. How can you say you can do something that I cannot? Don't be stupid. We are going to go stealing tonight." So off they went. And the thief broke into a house and stole and snuck out. No problems. The king then went in. And of course, he didn't know what he was doing. He got caught and he got beaten viciously. So there we see, you need training. Merely having skills in other areas or talents or reputation in other areas doesn't help. You need skills. And we see it perhaps more visibly. Maybe we don't know too many thieves. But we know people in emergency service, for example, or the military and emergency services, they need to study and train. For them to be successful in their endeavors, they need both knowledge and training in their knowledge. And also where we see this is if you have an honest disposition and you try to lie, people tend to know quite easily. But others are much more skilled in telling lies. They have a lot of experience at doing so. Whereas perhaps for yourselves who don't have such a habit, if you tell a lie, your face maybe will blush or you'll blink a lot and it will be quite obvious to everyone that you are telling a lie. So this, again, it all comes down to training based on knowledge. Then transformation will come. And this is what we need to do in terms of our spiritual development too.
Isa nganzu de beju yorwa beju rigni yore chik karso no yaha rikchi yore chik rikshoni yore. Jesan jesu yaha digi mani nganzu gi singa na la tondo tap sagirwa. Chana won sa ne an gaji gresne ko ro chene pini konso kyu jima de juji ne di gre. Shoga se de pa de 그 규망부여와 배주 망부여와 배주 이디와 주진 되고로 전화 공면에 서비스는 마신가 나는 바로 신가야 다 사사 아니야 저제 규날 주신 나로 주신에 니디고래 근데 하고 말하고 규날 주되어와 하고서 그래서 배주 망부여와 배주 릭니여래제 제가 배주 규주여 규 제가 배주 야가디기 마저데 뜬도 마사 사산의 가지그레스는 야 연구래제 영어지는 큐디 나로 주는 배주 망보 예되어 기마디와 주는 예되그래제와 그 장부로와 제가 하고 말도세 배주 교화되게도 마도도사 사산의 신가지 줄도 아니지 거래. 제가 미하고 그래도 남자 진짜 저 배주래 배 장부어디.
So where I'm from, most people are farmers, and those who have cattle, they tend to have, there are two, I think you said, like types of cows, and one type is really more intelligent than the other. So the intelligent type, they will go out into the pasture in the day, they'll eat and feed, and at night they will return to the herd, and they'll gather together. And the intelligent ones will also know to go into the middle of the herd because it's pretty cold, and in the middle it's a bit warmer. The others who are a little bit stupid, they will go out and eat, and they'll just think they'll sleep there for the night. But it's really cold. Or if they're made to go back, the shepherd or the herder brings them back, then they won't have the intelligence to know they need to try and angle to get amongst the other cows to stay warm. They'll just try and sleep wherever they are. So we see there that some have trained, and therefore they act as if they are much more intelligent. They seem to really know what they're doing, whereas others, they haven't trained themselves that well.
배주 자스 돈도 사야지 잠데 니도베네 상기 밀레도 진다디 일레도 녀라단 거와 용하라고 그래. 세상 그 기마도 자산은 많이 큐나로 기마도 주의 니도베 하고고 수서 수고 가다 하고고 말고 녀다라고 말다 나들이.
And moreover, those that aren't so intelligent, when they go out and they eat and they decide, actually, I'm just staying here because they're a bit too stupid to realize to walk back. If the herdsperson doesn't come and get them in at night and finds them the next day, then they get beaten as well. So not only have they had to endure a night in the cold and alone, now they get beaten in the morning as well.
장도를 돼야 돼. 계시모를 곰시 써야 돼. 계시모 거야 돼. 다 시행 거야 써야 되도 봐다. 제산도 두시네. 로 참발라고 그래서 다디네 뒤섬 님말 소저 양라게 레버라네 송화신도 제세데 갑갑리야 안타바치 태신 소정 그신 경로서 당보 두신 렘바나 신진 태신 소저 랭고 그래 소저야라 뒤 삼섬 갑레가레 세상 뒤자 소속이 뒤서 야고여야 다디네 고갑다 뒤인체네 아니 갑갑리야 태신 소저 랭고 그래 야라게 안데바 렘 차외질에 배 야고체 디니메텔이야다 야고치 송에데 빼마서 계치모레서 나 뒤섬 뒤사 니모 소저야라게 게브라라네 송화신도 제 디네 송에데 계치모레서 대 송에데 계치모레서 빼마서 계치모서 송고 그래서.
Those stories serve to encourage you to apply training to your mind, recognizing that this will take time, but success will definitely follow if one trains repeatedly over a sustained period based on knowledge. And so as to aid training, the training in virtue, the text continues. The 8 one-day vows of accumulation and purification. And having received these vows properly, it is essential to guard them. So here, when you have opportunities, such as some of you had yesterday, to take the 8 Mahayana precepts, this is excellent to do. And whenever one takes vows, whether it's the 8 Mahayana precepts, or the 5 vows of the non-ordained, or the vows of the ordained, it is essential to guard them excellently, because these are all assistants or aids that help us in training our mind.
지사 태바침비 소중을 렌지 송여대 가르송고르스네 태바침비 소중을레데 잠니제게 장주sem게 장주sem기 심베드네 파진주게 장주sem바 상예다 장주sem바 결혼하기 셈징에 된다라야 잠니제게 파진주게 냠는 지다와 제바네 내야 디나지 지긴세데 켈렌스와 디송여와 제사디 디 켈렌제네 안 삼노나라야 디 지긴셈베 야네야도 삼단 디 도초다 마가와시에 계침버려서 인송고래서 다 대신 넘균네 전주셈 잠니제 전주셈이 냠는 제주도스는 곰미 돔곰나 다고 대신 소정 랭거야서 말와 다 대신 소정세디 디링린 쇼벨린 상이 니모 마셔봐 니샤지리라 제가 넘균네 되게 전주셈다 디니 곰마투기 뒤스 메칸솔이야 안지 뒤스 투노지리야 되게 삼다 냠네 제야디 고합티고르와 제자디네 디네자 제자디 소야디 제자 장쇼셈 곰야 니지 곰야 되게 켈렌 제바디 안베직 니자 지기링이야 순야디 대가 소야베 보다바 삼나네 야네야도 삼다지 순거리 계신 보려서 제가 되네 지금 이미지 되네 지래 아니 지 니메데 제마지래 니니 숨시가 또 지데 장도신 니 야고도스는 니 고매기 되냐기 듬바셔서 니미지 되네 무디제 잠니제 장주심 냠는지야디 용고로 받아 되네 이제 무디지 그디나 냠는지 돼야디 용고로 봐 되네 자다 당보 안직 뒤세 매한다 되네게 지금 니가 맞죠 안지라 니미지 그ring이야 대신 소주 냠는지야디 제 되네 뒤섬이 안에 양도 제고래서도 직제 니제 되네 마마마제는 곰시야 샤샤도 얘네 장 그디나 된 잠이 자주셈 파진족이 냠네 제도 연구를 해서지 어두시는 숨도와
The 8 Mahayana precepts, these are taken with the motivation to develop the love and compassion of bodhisattvas. So in the ceremony, as you know well, you're looking to the bodhisattvas as one's role model, and one is determining or making the determination, I will follow their example. I will, for these 24 hours, I will refrain from certain misdeeds because I'm striving within this period to develop love and compassion within myself and to follow the example of the bodhisattvas, and in this period, to not act in a way contrary to the bodhisattvas. So one here is explicitly holding the bodhisattvas and their remarkable attitude up as one's role model to emulate. And thereby, just for this short period, one focuses oneself on cultivating minds such as love and compassion and living under their influence. And from time to time, when opportunity comes, taking the Mahayana precepts, this helps us develop our habituation towards virtuous minds such as love and compassion. And this then aids in the eventual generation of bodhicitta itself. So therefore, when one has the opportunity to take the Mahayana precepts, this really is an excellent training to engage in.
기디네 아주게 지금 남이 제가 카든제다 된래네 기디나 저게 잠로체당 장주셈 니게다 두신의 안에 안도지 용고를 받으시다 카든제 오래세디 넘긴다 지 왕라 나치 지슈도 저랑 카든제 오래다서도 마치도 되 켈린 제주네 기디나 님을 딱 봐라 제고야지 최고로 와 켈린을 받아 제고도 님을 딱 봐지는 곰시로 태진다 곰시 태네 야야 줘야기 된다라 송고로 봐 네, 이래 당한 저기 지 카든제 외가려 삼무시라 마다오라 제지 관마 되신데 야기시라 조tum다 소소기 아주 냠녀로 리기도 하드네 지다디 니네레 니네 자다 두시네 가제로 된다라 아주게 가르치면은 되니기 소소기 륜가 있으면 요거네 샬런여바 지기메 선배 삼로 야네도 다야 다 거기 동아들 마산에 탑민의 타와 지긴 선배 탑에 타와 토와 지긴 선배게 삼로데 야네야도 다야 디네 다네다 다 랑신 탐제 코알을 줘와서 샘제 탐제 동아다 자와 대와다 템버 쇼 선배 삼로데 야네야다 된 동아다 자와 쇼 선배 삼로다 샘제데 동아다 자와 대와다 템바다 녜지기 대연장의 샘제 탐제 상요코바 토버 쇼 선배기다 두시네 삼로디게 다디 두시네 삼로데 야네야도 다이다동 안주게 개와 줍세디 디레 다 제수 삼로도 소 곰시 곰리한 고야네야도 야네야다도 디 삼로데 뉴바체체체로도 디 도초 현래 체외 삼바다 현래 륜의 이스미 죄방 안바디 찾아마 남비게 삼로 군로디게마 슈체체 촌촌촌 루고로와 진짜 디바드마 개와디파 슈체체로도 디바드마 촌 루고로 고니 길로데 디바르와데 파쇼디 직직도 뉴바체 디마 고라디나시 지나 누시네야 야네야도 공부리에서 달랍제디 겸조이 제네게 랍제디 냠렌제디 디레 당한주게 럼림나라 셰바야 냠렌제 디레 준준나로 송바이나 냠렌제 디수레 파진두게 냠렌디 장주심유 군에 나제 파진두게 냠렌 다디디 셰바데 수림 시스만 캡수조 수림송 데네 냠렌제기 타바치메 소종네 냠렌제 월세드 데네 잠니제 장주심 안도시네 냠렌제디 두수 삼로 야네 야도도 공고리에 사지 언도네 송고도 당한주게 나 디링 쉬야데 데네 실 삼자나 딩한주게 다 라렌다이데 디레 디삼다 디타와네 가주게 삼론나로 뉴바샤고레 디 뉴바샤바네 개와레 디 하는 가주게 그게 시비나 캐줘요. 근데 디기에는 맞을야. 개와 치마이나야. 대 약부터야다. 안에 지기 된델아야 디기 주비하기 용리에 사지. 뉴스 숨도와
Many of you have daily commitments to do, a daily set meditation practice. And this whatever practices you have as a daily commitment will start with going for refuge and then generating bodhicitta. And the reason for doing this several times every day is that this is a process of habituation, of repetition to aid habituation. So if several times a day one is going for refuge, generating bodhicitta, this aids developing these habitual ways of thinking. Especially if it's done in a way where it's more than a mere recitation. So the Tibetan word for, in English we say our commitment, the Tibetan word is literally something like a mouth recitation. So just merely a recitation. So if it is done as just a recitation, then there's some benefit, but it's not that much. What one should be doing with one's daily meditation, with one's daily commitments, is because one is engaging in these same practices every day over a sustained period, this is your opportunity to develop the habituation to these virtuous minds. To develop, so when one is going through one's commitments, the parts on refuge, the parts on bodhicitta, these are so important. Because this is the part where you reflect on the sufferings of samsara, the reason to gain freedom from samsara, and my determination to do so, and not just for myself, for others too who are suffering. And then you generate love, compassion, and bodhicitta. And if you do that every day, this is the main part, the most important part of one's commitments. And strengthening the minds of refuge, definite emergence, love and compassion, and so forth. And that process can be expressed now in different ways. We can say, by doing your commitments well like this, you're accumulating a lot of virtue. And what does it mean to be accumulating a lot of virtue? It means to be strengthening our virtuous minds, strengthening our habituation to virtuous minds, training our mind to be virtuous. This is the accumulation of virtue. Developing our potency, or these imprints as potency, or energy towards our virtuous ways of thinking. So this is our habituation to virtuous ways of thinking. And then what does purification mean? It means as we were becoming more habituated to virtuous ways of thinking, we are proportionately weakening our habituation to non-virtuous ways of thinking. So this is the purification of non-virtue. The purification of non-virtue comes about through the accumulation of virtue, which is virtuous ways of thinking. So if we want to purify, the way we do it is through strengthening virtuous ways of thinking. And these two act in proportion. And in all the various Buddhist texts and practices, they are all either directly in line with what has been said or aids to that. So if you are coming to the Lama weekend teachings, or the weeknight teachings on engaging in the Bodhisattva's way of life, or reading other Dharma texts, they all come down to the same thing. Training your mind to develop habituous ways of thinking which are virtuous, and thereby breaking habituous ways of thinking which are non-virtuous. All the Buddhist texts and teachings lead to that. Moreover, also, the vows that you take, the vows that you guard well, these too lead to developing, these are branches to aid us in our practice of developing habituation to virtuous ways of thinking and breaking habituation to non-virtuous ways of thinking. So from this explanation, hopefully it's clear what is meant by Buddhist practice, how to engage in your own Buddhist practice, and how all these various branches of Buddhist practice and Buddhist teachings and texts all direct us in the same direction of radically transforming our mind. Then thank you very much, and we'll conclude there for this afternoon. Thank you.